Here we go. All right. Sweet. Welcome to Chadiv, Lightning Talks. Keep this short and sweet. Next week we have Chris Keithley coming at us. He didn't know just until now. Chris, what's the topic? Still figuring it out.
If you were in the Slack channel,
Okay.
slightly less.
O is evil, but with less bombast.
It's not and use other concepts.
Rethinking best practices. You heard it here, folks. All right. So, do we have? Nice. James is actually talking second. He was nice enough to let our first speaker use his laptop. So, everybody, give a round of applause for James.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Is this working? All right. I'm James Lemmons, independent developer. Today I want to show you Canopy. Anybody heard of Canopy? 3. All right. Doesn't seem to be, you don't hear about it much, so I thought it might be something good to get people up to speed on. What Canopy is for testing, but it's an F# domain-specific language built on Selenium. However, you don't have to know F#, you don't have to know Selenium. I don't know either one of those, but it still works. You just have to figure out the syntax. I first saw this and I thought, wow, that's pretty easy. I can test everything with that. And then I started using it. I was like, wow, this is powerful. I can really test everything. So I've been using it ever since. I'm just going to show you a basic test here. Start out, you need a F# console application. Simple enough. So once you've got that, we got to get Canopy in here. It's just a new Git package, so install package Canopy, and after it works its magic, you've got Canopy ready to go. Now we need something to test, so I picked the try to have jobs page because we have a nice a form we can fill out to test. And we're gonna make sure the page loads. It's the right information. We're gonna put in a search, and we're gonna test it. So we'll jump into the code right away here. Sorry, I'm going so fast. I have 6 minutes of content and 5 minutes to tell you about it. First thing we're going to do here is start Firefox. You can start Chrome, whatever you want. Now we're going to define a test. You can put as many tests in here as you want. We're just going to start with a simple one. First step is, what URL are we going to load, obviously. And now we're going to do our first assert. We are going to assert that the H1 tag contains find a great job in Chattanooga. If it doesn't, that'll fail. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the string developer and shove that into the input field. And you find all your fields just by using CSS selectors. So this one's got an ID on it, so we just pound ID, put the data in there. So if it's your application you're testing, obviously it's best if you can put IDs and everything. Makes it a lot easier. But if it's somebody else's or you don't, that's fine. The submit button didn't have an ID, so we're just going to find it by the type being submit, and we're going to click that. Then we're going to have one more assert. We're going to say the number of divs with a job class, we're expecting 1. We're expecting 1 result. And then you just say run, and off we go. 5 minutes doesn't leave any time for error, so I'm not live coding this, but I have a nice video. You can see how fast this runs. Run our test. It fires up Firefox, even moves it over so you can watch what happens and see your console. Done. Our test passed. And so, you get the output here that it passed. We had one test that passed, but now let's go back and break it. So let's change our expected result to 2. Of course, that's not going to work, and so you're going to get an error. It expected 2. It got 1. It was a fail. All right, so this works great if you have a traditional page and you're posting back, but if you're doing some AJAX stuff, it gets just slightly more complicated. I was doing an Angular app where you hit submit, we're staying on the same page, but we got to go back and forth to the server. And I was disabling the submit button after they click it. So what we have to do is, we have to wait on that to happen. So there's a little function I wrote here that just says, go find the submit button and see if it's disabled. And once you've written that function, you can scatter throughout your code a wait for. Wait for something to happen. Wait for something to be true before we move on. You can count stuff. You can see if it exists, whatever. So that's the one little catch if you're doing something in JavaScript. Other than that, pretty straightforward. So I just want to show you, I said we can test anything. So this is a pretty simple form. At this point, we know how to test this, but do we know if it really worked? I mean, we didn't get an error, but do we know that the patient was added to the system? Well, a couple options here. We could just write another test that logs into our administrative site and checks for the data. If that works, hey, we know that everything worked end to end, it's working. But, okay, so maybe you don't have an administrative web page. Well, it's just code. We can do whatever we want. So this is F#. I don't know what this means, but this, go to your database and make sure that the data's there. Like this little thing right here, I have no idea what that does, but I think somebody's talking about F# later, so maybe they can tell us. So whatever you want to do, write to a log. There are so many things you can do that I just don't have time to cover. One thing I do want to say, though, in the end, you've got an exe. You can run this manually. You can make it part of a build process, a testing process. And if I don't use TeamCity, but I know you can integrate with TeamCity. So pretty cool. I'm enjoying it. That's Canopy. Thank you.
Hey everybody, how goes it? All right. So, how many of you here have ever flown a quadcopter? Sweet, awesome. Dude, number of hands, cool, right on. So why would you learn to fly a small unmanned aerial vehicle? Sick, right? How many of you knew drone racing was a thing before that video? So if you are interested in getting into drone racing or just flying a quadcopter, FAA has some regulations. I do recommend you go to their website, get a handle on it. You do have to register if you got a drone that's over half a pound. If you are considering flying commercially, in other words, you want to get paid to fly a drone, whether it be for video, for surveying, for whatever, you got to get an exemption. It's Section 333. You have to have a pilot's license currently to do that, which really sucks for the industry. We are hoping the FAA will change that in the near future, because the sooner they do, the sooner that industry can grow from that. Registering your drone is simple. Do not be scammed by anybody trying to sell you. Know before your fly campaign.
Start flying an unmanned aircraft? Projections from the Consumer Electronics Association show nearly 2 million units will be sold in 2016. Whether it's for fun or for business, there are a few things you need to know to take responsibility for how you operate. For instance, you aren't allowed to fly higher than 400 feet, or that you need permission to fly within 5 miles of an airport. Did you know that it's also illegal to fly near stadiums? And don't interfere with the work of emergency responders. It's complicated, but we're here to help you fly responsibly. Learn more at knowbeforeyoufly.org. Know Before You Fly was created by AU.
Yeah, just a quick review of can't fly above 400 feet near people or stadiums within 5 miles of airports. That's a serious one. More than 55 pounds or fly for payment without authorization. The AMA, this is an awesome organization. If you are considering doing any model aviation of any kind, sign up with them. It's like $70 a year or something like that, and you get liability coverage for your drone. So if you slam it into somebody's car, you probably will be covered. I'm not going to say you will be covered because I am not a lawyer. I do not know all of the ins and outs of their liability coverage, but yes, check it out. It's phenomenal. Some of the real quick controls for drones. Roll is going to turn you left and right. Pitch will actually move you forward and backward. Yaw is actually going to turn your vehicle left and right like you shake your head. And throttle actually gives you lift as well as speed. Transmitter modes. I'm going to cover this because this confused me for a while. I was learning mode 4 when I should have been learning mode 2 in the US. Every advice that you'll receive online in the US mostly will be about mode 2, and that's just basically the positioning of your sticks on your transmitter. So keep that in mind if you do want to get into this. Channels, you'll see this when you go to pick up a remote. It will have a certain number of channels. 4 channels is the minimum for a quadcopter that handles the 4 controls we just went over. 6 channels gives you extra knobs, buttons, switches, etc. 8 channels, again, same thing. Extra knobs, buttons, switches to do quad. Batteries. I do want to cover this briefly because batteries is a safety thing. Most of them are going to be lithium polymer. Charging. Some of them are not overcharge protected, so you will want to be aware of that when you go to charge batteries. These are all 3.3 volt, I think. And in this one, so if you go to charge a battery, have this little lighted charger right there will actually protect all your batteries. Okay. FPV, if you are interested in first-person view, that's the ability to actually see with a headset from the drone's onboard camera's perspective. You do currently need a ham radio amateur license. $15 for the test, $30 for the book. It's not very difficult. As the industry grows, equipment will come out that you won't need this, but currently you do. Line of sight. This is actually currently an FAA regulation. If you want to fly outdoors, you have to be able to see your drone. So really weird because FAA has so far been totally awesome about some of the racing events that have gone on. We kind of are wondering, though, when it comes to the legality of practicing, how can we do that if we can't do line of sight? Still figuring that out. Pre-flight checklist is a good thing to have when you are gonna start flying. Figure out what's a good one that matches your particular drone. I forgot to go through mine once, and a screw came loose, and I lost an arm. Not this one. All right, okay, basically, the most important thing when you're about to crash, because it's going to happen, throttle down. Throttle down, throttle down. Do not try to save it and rescue it and throttle up, slamming it into somebody's face. Just FYI, flightzone.com, we are going to be opening up a raceway in the near future, allowing you to do first-person view racing right here in Chattanooga. We are giving free flight lessons at the library every Saturday in February and March. Come check it out.
So this is a mission MySQL. I already know. Problem was we were getting duplicate transactions. Excuse me. We were getting duplicate transactions in a system that wasn't supposed to allow duplicate transactions. Specifically, we would get an API call. Is that readable there? That's an example of a similar API call where people are hitting us with a GET either through an app or a web browser client that goes through a relay, or sometimes outside vending systems. And in one really bad case, the firewall between the production system and everybody else got backed up and released a whole bunch of people going, come on, work, all at the same time. System failed in epic fashion, let a small number of transactions be duplicated 2 or 3 times. Because the transactions are rather lengthy and involved, this isn't as easy as just put an insert into a database. You've got to go do lots of calculations, you've got to do lots of sanity checks, and the conditions change as they make payments against things. Trying things. We already had a lot of logic in the system, checking the transactions table for a duplicate transaction. We were looking for that account, did that last amount exist in the last 2 minutes? And believe it or not, we'd end up with 2 or 3 threads who all said, no, it's not there, let's go ahead and complete the transaction. And we're talking there, you're only talking a couple lines of code, and yet they would still bump into each other and not see that the other one was doing it. We were using transactions, so we thought we'd play around with this just to prove that we were really seeing what we were seeing. We did a complete table lock of all 21 tables involved in the transaction, because when you're doing a hard lock on the tables, you have to lock all of the tables involved, read or write, that's involved in a transaction. This is an experiment. Guess what still happened? Because MySQL in multiple threads just does not necessarily see what's going on in the other threads fast enough. My solution is actually compliments of Will Wade, who gave me is Will here? Yeah, there he is. Will said something that was like, yeah, I need to be doing a transaction queue, but we can't do the whole thing in a transaction queue and do them sequentially, but I can check in a smaller queue and see what's going on. So we built a small little table, TQ for transaction queue, and literally a little bit of sanity checking code worked pretty well. I was able to very consistently lock and unlock that table without having problems with other things locking and unlocking that table. And I'm not the MySQL rocket scientist, but it definitely seems to be involved with the size of the MySQL table involved. So at one of our locations, this is now working in production. We haven't had a problem since. We'll probably roll it out to other things. But if anybody's got a better way to look for possible duplicate transactions and prevent them, I'm ears. But that's what we ended up with so far. And I'm done. Oh, what we learned. That one's, I guess you'd call it atomic because it's very hard. You know, there's one lock on that table at a time. Nothing else can lock that table. And because it's small, nothing else also locked that. We couldn't get 2 things to try to lock that table and think they had it locked. When we were doing other things, the more tables we added or the more complexity we added, the worse it got. No, we can't, because we've got to run parallel transactions at once. We'll sometimes get 20 or 30, at the exact same second. It's fairly high volume at times. So this worked and faked up the sanity check we needed so that we could run simultaneous operations. We're using MySQL in a NoDB, which seems to work pretty well. I mean, honestly, it can read and write the tables and all that, but sometimes you'd get 2 things that would look for something that each of them thought wasn't there, and yet we could also look at another thread and see that it was. It depends on the thread. The isolation isn't that good.
HDMI. There we go. Okay, great. So here's the challenge. You want to design a great looking form. Modern development is going to require even more usable components, not just building the same form over the time. How many of you are tired of building sign-on forms? You need to avoid compatibility issues with JavaScript frameworks, maybe even a CSS framework.
And you need components to work on all devices. So what I'm going to do is show you how we can improve that by using Font Awesome icons. Never worked with Font Awesome icons. So basically, it's a CSS toolkit. It was developed originally to work with Bootstrap, but now they're off on their own, and they're scalable vector icons. So that means that they'll grow, they'll shrink, you can shadow them, you can do everything, and it's just this huge, huge collection of icons. So if we look at here, you can just see all the different icons that you can just pull in. And the great things about these, first of all, it's open source. Second thing is they're very easy to use. You can use them right out of the gate by simply implying this CSS class, FA female, but also you can also reference it using a Unicode text value, which we're going to do as well. So what we're going to do today is two things. One, we want to take a couple of items you'd put on a form and make them look a little better. So we'll start, look at this email address. One of the great things about the way this email address is, A, you don't need a label, so you get the real estate back. B, it's going to fit really nice on a form. C, the visual envelope just kind of tells people, hey, what this is for. So if you want to just do this natively with Font Awesome, all you have to do is just simply come down here and specify the class next to your input. But we're going to do something a little bit more custom, because remember, we want something that's very, very reusable. So I'm going to come over here too. And I'm not going to code live, but I am going to cut and paste. So here I've got a little form, and let's just look at it right now. So basically, it has no embellishment. It's just, here's input text. Here are some checkboxes. So we're going to cover password, text, checkboxes, and radio buttons. And checkboxes and radio buttons will be handled the same way. So I'm going to come back over here. And so the first thing you'll notice is that, well, back on the example, our email address, we want to kind of clean up that little box, make it a little nicer. So let's go over here. I want to cut and paste this. So now I've made my boxes a little nicer. Now what I want to do is put this little image to the left and add the background color to that. So we're going to do it. We're going to do it so that it's kind of reusable. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the before pseudo element for this class. How many of you are familiar with pseudo elements, using them in CSS? Okay, great. Great. So here, for input type password and type text, I'm going to have all the shading and coloring and everything looking the same. And then, remember, I wrapped it in that span, and I'm going to give it this class name, input image. So let's just look at that. Sorry. Now, it hasn't really done anything because we haven't specified the image. So here's where we get something that's kind of reusable. What I can do is I can add another class, and this class is going to say, I want you to represent an email. So I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to. This is where we're going to specify that icon by the Unicode value. Here, put it on user ID. Sorry, got the wrong one. But anyway, so there you go. So now you know how it works. So we just simply use a class with the span and use the pseudo element before, and then I can go back and steal these other two. I've got one for two other images. I think I lost my, there it is. You get all three of them. This live, the pressure. There we go. We've got three great looking fields that look really good. Users would know exactly what to do with those, and again, they would look great on a mobile device. Now let's look at the checkboxes. Checkboxes, I don't know why, but every browser has to make a checkbox look different. I don't understand why. Chrome's got the tiny little box. Firefox's is okay, but what if we wanted a standard one? We also want one a little larger, because if you're looking on a small device, you want to be able to see a little more clearly. So we're going to do something similar. In this case, we simply have our input checkbox in our label. And the trick here is what we're going to do is we're going to hide the checkbox itself. And we're going to overlay the checkbox with the icon image. So let's do that. Add and copy all of these. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hide that checkbox. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the take the checkbox in the label and use the pseudo element before. We're going to say, hey, I want you to use Font Awesome for your family, for your font family. And I want you to display inline blocks so it'll display together. And then there's two states of a checkbox. There's checked and unchecked. So when it's checked, I want to use this image, which is going to have a little check mark on it. And then when it's unchecked, I want it to just be a square box. So let's save that. Go back over here. Voila. There we go. Nice looking check boxes. That's it.
I just tried DisplayPort because I can't mirror on this one.
Yeah, beautiful. Yep.
Blast. So I'm really not. We can roll with this. We'll make this work.
All right. Sure you don't need the slides?
Hi everyone, my name is Tom. I am going to talk about smoke testing non-Ruby apps with Ruby tools. Before we begin, I'd like to preface this by saying that I currently work for Delegator. We do marketing, web development. Being in that space, we do lots of digital advertising, that kind of stuff. One of the things that I work with very frequently are these e-commerce platforms, and if you haven't had the pleasure of working with one of those yet, I applaud you. This is one that will go unnamed, but the icon is up there in the top left-hand corner if you, want some reasons to contemplate your life. This is my favorite demo client, Madison Island, and they like to go on their site and install all kinds of plugins. This one is an e-commerce platform very much like the WordPress of e-commerce kind of thing, where you can, easily go to the admin panel and add all sorts of plugins. It's really awful though, because all of those plugins have very terrible code and they will frequently break your site, especially the critical parts that are like, the checkout process or like the add to cart button. And so we just want to do some really, really, really high level stuff to make sure that that kind of thing doesn't go unnoticed by us as developers. What we're going to use to do that is Phantom.js. This is a testing tool that runs on all platforms, does not require a Xorg installation if you're running on Linux or CI environments, which is really, really handy. We're going to be using some Ruby tools, namely RSpec, as our test runner. And then we're going to be using Capybara, or however you say that word. You can come argue with me about that later. This just gives us a nice little cleaner syntax for it. So one of the very basic use cases we're going to do here is we're going to try to add something to our cart. So as a user, as a customer on this site, I expect that when I go to a product page and I want to buy my $225 sunglasses, that when I click on the Add to Cart button, that it actually adds it to the cart, and I get that lovely display message there. So-and-so is added to your shopping cart. Okay, so we're going to do this in our Ruby testing tools, and it's going to be great. Spoilers there. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to install our gems. There's all the stuff that I just mentioned. RSpec, Capybara. Poltergeist is just the connector between Phantom.js and all these cool Ruby things. This is relatively straightforward if you've seen a gem file before. The next thing. We are going to instruct our testing tools that we are not working with a Ruby application. So if we were working with plain, regular, Rails or Sinatra or something, it would try to spin up a rack application for us. And since we don't have that, we're going to tell it to not run the server. So we're going to use the existing stuff that we have set up for our awful PHP garbage in the background. And we're going to point it at our favorite website here, example.dev. Two other things, I'm going to ignore JavaScript errors. All those lovely third-party plugins have terrible, terrible JavaScript, and so those pop up a zillion errors. We're going to ignore those. And then I like to run SSL in my local dev environment, so we're going to ignore SSL errors because I've got a self-signed certificate. And, okay, one more time. We were expecting that when we clicked on the Add to Cart button, we get that lovely message, and here's how we say that in our Ruby testing tool. Visit the URL, click on the button by text. You can find it by text instead of by CSS selector or what have you. It's really easy to use. And then we're going to expect that the page, once it's finished loading, has the content of so-and-so is added to your shopping cart. And this is really easy to run because we've set up rake to do it. bin/rake. Oh yeah. There's a few other examples up here that I'm not going to cover, but the important one is that we passed all of our lovely tests, and it tells us how long they took to happen. The important one that we were looking at there was that the shopping cart lets me add things to it, and that succeeded. And it took 1.27 seconds, and everyone's happy that they can buy things on this ridiculously expensive website. That's about all I have, except for two other totally random, completely off-topic things. I just wanted to mention I'm personally a fan of Arch Linux. I'm a fanatic. Second thing, PC game that's really fun to play. If you guys haven't seen it, it's called The Witness. You should definitely check it out. It's on Steam. It's super fun for all you people in this room that are the puzzly type. Highly recommend it. Super awesome. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. I can't remember my password.
Everybody get over for Branden.
I'm Branden. That was the Windows 10 login screen. So I'm going to be talking about powering up your database development with system tables and views in SQL Server. How many of you use SQL Server? All right, so some people. So, started working with SQL Server a while ago, and I didn't always know about system views and tables, and I was getting all these requests. That was early 2000s. After, it was kind of magic, and anybody who doesn't get that picture, see me after class, that's important. So that's great. Why do people care? People care that LibreOffice will randomly realign your bullet points. That's very important to know. Usually for non-trivial applications, we deal with a lot of databases. We can streamline the search for information if we know how to get to it, particularly if the database is hosted on a virtual machine that is not configured properly, and it takes upwards of 2 minutes for SQL Server Management Studio to start up. Not that this happened to me for a year and a half. And ultimately, good developers are lazy. So anything that we can automate, anything we can script and report on, any way that we can get this information without having to go to the UI, please.
Move a little closer to your mic so we can hear you.
No, hearing me is bad. Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Good. So as of SQL Server 2014, there are 118 system tables and 425 system views across these different categories. You may not use replication. You may not have compatibility concerns. There's going to be something in this in that listing that you're going to care about at some point. So demos. I scrolled directly past the demo screen. There are a number of different things that we can do, pieces of information that we can get from system tables pretty easily. So what if somebody asks us, what are the configuration settings on this server? Connect to localhost. Everybody can see that clearly. We have pretty much any configuration setting that you would care to know. And you can switch between different servers, get that information reported to you, check for changes. Say we've got a database that has thousands and thousands of tables. We don't know how many there are. It's a third-party vendor system. Documentation is non-existent. All right, HDMI is not supported.
The old jiggle.
Jiggle, jiggle.
Have you tried turning on and off?
Yeah.
Chadiv tech support.
Wait. Let me try unplugging it and plugging it back in again. So SQL Server can break your projector setup. That's an unknown feature. And we also have these information schema tables, which give us the same sorts of things. Not as detailed, if you want to look at them side by side. Not as detailed. And I broke it again. Hey. So there's less information in your information schema tables as I jiggle, but it really?
Yeah.
All right, everybody log on and look at the live stream. Go to your device. It's beautiful. All right. So maybe we're having just a projector. Okay. Maybe I won't demo very much anymore. So maybe we want to know how many fields are in each table, and what their types are for the store table in AdventureWorks. Please don't break. All right. This is why you switch from. Good Lord. This is why you switch from the master database actually to your AdventureWorks table before you start demoing your code. So once again, we're going to look at information schema side by side with the other views. Information schema is still a little bit lighter weight, and what I'm noticing is I've got 10 fields here and only 6 here. I can't zoom back in easily. So if you can... Yeah. I'm used to scrolling. I'm lazy. Okay, now we can see it. What we have is we have these lovely user-defined data types. So that name field is actually a varchar in varchar 50. But you can throw off any interrogation you do of your system tables by creating just arbitrary types and calling them whatever you want. There are a few other things that we can do. For instance, we've got a junior dev that says we'll only need to update one of our stored procedures if we change all the columns in our employee table. So we can search the information schema, look at the routines, see that the projector has gone out again. Am I emitting low-level EM pulses? All right, I'll stand. There we go. So enjoy it while we've got it. So the junior dev says, oh, we can change our whole table and we're only going to affect one stored procedure. Well, we can look and see that while the projector works, we can search for the employee table in the procedure definitions, and we can see that there's actually 5. So junior dev is wrong. We all get to work over the weekend. All right, so if we want to get, for instance, table counts, everybody knows select count blah. In AdventureWorks, I can write this little query, and select the table schema from all working projectors and get this series of queries that I can run, and then paste down here to unify this whole mess into a table that will take a few seconds, and it will eventually tell me how many records I have in each table. AdventureWorks is kind of small, so under 100 tables. Or we could join a couple of system tables, including the dynamic or DMDB partition stats view, and get those results instantly. These are approximated, so it's not going to be up to the minute, but if you have large tables, for instance, this table with over 2 million rows and only 2 fields, that took, not going to run it again, it's disconnected, 1.5 minutes on one database with no activity on it. Or if you needed to get database documentation all of a sudden, you could write a long convoluted query which I can share if anyone's interested, dump it into markup, and if you had zero database documentation before, now you have an easily readable list of every single table that you have, every object, and I switched back to not AdventureWorks, didn't I? This way, suitable for inclusion in your documentation or just reading through developers who have no vendor documentation with your DB. And let me see. Kill the projector again. Here are some references. Don't have to take my word for it. Microsoft has posted some things. There's some very good articles. Or you could just browse MSDB and see all the beauty on your own monitor, which will not cut out intermittently. About that.
All right. So we're running a little bit late. If anybody needs to duck out to return to your employer, please feel free. We can get over for David.
Everything like crazy small. All right, I have a riveting talk about email tagging. I know everyone here has to deal with email every day, and some of you may enjoy it, some of you may not enjoy it, but so here we go. I have my own company and I have worked with many firms and I deal with emails all day. Stuff like, need help, can you fix this, website design. These are great subject lines to work with all day. So here I have a demo account that I set up, and this is kind of how I deal with email. I wake up in the morning, and it might look like this, and I kind of go through 3 layers of filtering first. Is it trash, or do I need to unsubscribe? I do that first. Is it information that I need to tag and file away? I'll do that. And then if it's actionable for that day, something that's small, I'll just leave it sitting there. And after I've made it through that, watch the little CBS this morning, then I'll go through and filter again, and I'll work through, do I need to respond to it and tag it, get rid of it? Do I need to input it into the project management system? Or do I need to leave it alone for later because I'm pretty sure I'm going to handle this today? So here is an example of, inbox in the morning. Some of you might be like, only 5, that's awesome. To me, this is a bad inbox. I don't like it. So let's start with, kind of how I'm working here. The way I work is I tag everything with either it's current or done. It's client A, B, C, what project it is. So you can see down here I have something like FTP credentials. What I'll do is I'll say, this is for client A, this is for project B, and this is their FTP stuff. So whenever I'm going back and looking for something, it's super easy to find it. Because you always have clients saying, oh, we agreed on that scope, or the estimate was this, and you say, no, that's not what it was. Oh, yeah, it was. Hold on, let me forward you your email from April 7th that says exactly how much you're going to pay me to handle this project. I don't know about you guys, but it saves me a lot of headache and a lot of money issues dealing with clients. Yeah, so that's kind of my folder breakdown. So it's pretty easy. You wake up, you say this is, someone needs a W-9. You guys probably see that this time of year. So your current client A, and I might put that under an invoice just for future reference, and get rid of it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Any questions about email tagging or saving time with email? I use Gmail. My main account has the emails from different firms, at whatever, all coming into there, and I filter it all in my main account. And that's where the tagging really comes into play, because any email that gets saved has to have a tag. Anyone else? All right, cool.
All right. Did I miss anybody? I feel like that was everybody. Well, next week, Chris Keithley is back with us, so come check out his talk. It'll be a good one, and we'll see you guys then. Thanks.